Gilmore to Andrechuk, shooting, score! Dave Andrechuk hits the 50 mark, down the backing, Clark races him. Holy Mackinac, he got three!
Good morning, Leaf fans. Welcome back to the Leafs Lounge. Back here again with Justin Kudo, co-host. Justin, how you doing? It's been a while. What's going on?
I know it's been a while since we've chatted, since last Thursday, but a couple wins for the Buds and a tough loss earlier this week that we'll get into against Boston. Some time for redemption tonight, and it's a very exciting time of the year with trade deadline around the corner. I know so many Leaf fans want every single player that's available, but I guess we'll break down which ones are actually realistic and which ones will help the team the most.
No, exactly. Definitely a very exciting week. So, we want to at least cover off a lot of what happened in the last 24 hours, flurry of trade activity, and just obviously talk about what we expect to happen tomorrow. So we're getting to that. Probably don't need to spend too much time on the game last night. Arguably, probably the most boring Leaf game of the year. It was a grind, and you were probably the same way as me, where you're just like, okay, this is the kind of game where as long as we get to 2 points, I don't care how it happened, but that was a tough watch.
That was a brutal game to watch from start to finish. Like, oh my gosh. There was nothing going on, I felt. And then Nylander scored, and I was like, okay, maybe like now teams will start, like Buffalo will loosen up a bit, and then the game will start flowing. And then no. And it's more of the same. Just an absolute grind to get through. But hey, Matthews scores the OT winner. We walk out with 2 points. And we kind of stay paced with Boston because they lost Edmonton on Tuesday. So, we're kind of right there still.
Yeah, for sure. I think we got the one game in hand, but obviously if we don't pick up the 2 points tonight, kind of all for naught. But we're getting to that. I think I don't know if you caught it, post-game, they interviewed Austin Matthews, and he looked like he was hanging on by a thin thread. Like if he didn't have his hockey stick holding him up in the interview, I think he might have fallen over.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. I think it's
the flu bug.
Another flu bug. Another one. Like, oh my gosh.
Terrible luck, right? Again,
it's Connor Timmins. He came in and contaminated everybody.
I think that might be what's going on. It looked like everyone had mono on that team. My God.
But, yeah, I saw that. I saw that post game as well. I actually watched the game on TNT last night because I can't stand the Sportsnet people in the intermissions. And I was like, oh, I like Biz and I like the TNT guys. So
yeah, they're very entertaining for sure.
But then I heard everybody like on Twitter was complaining about the nonsense that goes on during the intermissions. I don't know maybe you could tell me what they were saying, but I heard it was just brutal.
Yeah. I mean, I think everyone's obviously at this point in time, it's obviously very difficult to spend a lot of time on Twitter, even though the temptation is to check and see, has there been a trade? What's going on, especially Leaf related, but it's an absolute cesspool out there right now.
It's because everybody is like, oh, if the Leafs stand pat, then Tree Living's not dedicated to winning. But I don't want us to make a rash move that doesn't help our team. I see like the Leafs are in on Joel Edmondson on the Capitals. Does he do anything that really helps our team get better? Where would he slot in? Where would he slot in? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think Joel Edmondson, we can touch on that. Like that seems to be the hot rumor, if you even want to call it that. And it just seems like because a lot of that money is already retained on the Canadians' books, they could basically bring him in, and I think he'd be a cap hit of like $300K for the remainder of the season.
No, you can't. They couldn't do double retention again though, because the Habs already have 50. The Caps can only do.
I don't think they'd have to, right? Because they'd be taking whatever the Caps are paying, which I think is next to nothing right now, if I'm not mistaken. There's not much like in terms of the tradable asset that would be moving, I don't think there's much money that would have to come over it. So I don't think you'd have to retain again. I think that's the whole appeal. But anyways, like I agree. I don't think the player is very exciting to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, last week we didn't get to touch on this because it happened pretty much right after we chatted, but Lyubushkin did come over.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that,
and he's not okay so far.
I was really iffy on it when it first happened. Not gonna lie, I said, Lyubushkin, really? Like you could have retained those, especially after last time in the playoffs. He was torched in the playoffs.
Yeah,
he was torched by Tampa, right? And of course, now 3 games in, he's looked good with Riley. Like all their analytics together are positive, but I'm not certain that him 2 years older is going to be any better come playoff time than he was 2 years ago in the same situation with pretty much the same team around him. I just think you're setting yourself up to just repeat a past failure.
Yeah, and it feels like if that's the only move, which we're obviously get into, I don't think it will be.
No, 100% not. No.
Then it will definitely leave a sour taste in my mouth. And I think for most Leaf fans, that it's like, okay, Treliving had all this big talk when he came in the offseason as a GM. Yeah, I want to build through the back end out, and I want to have a big physical D-man. And then, we saw him add Klingberg, got Simone Benoit, which we like. But if now your biggest move through the season is Lyubushkin, that's not really good. And I get it. He's kind of handcuffed from what he's got available to move, but you got to do something. Yeah.
I mean, of course, this can't be the last move, especially since we did double retention on him. So he's only getting paid like $400 against the cap. So there would be no reason to move. I think it was a 6th if we're not going to do something else. I just hope it's not something. I just hope it's not another 6th or 7th defenseman because we already have 5 of those.
Yeah. Well, and I think right now it's just about, could you get a team to take Brody? Could you get Brody to waive his no movement clause? Because if you can, to your point, who comes out? If you bring someone else in right now, who's coming up? You're not taking Riley, Lyubushkin out right now. You're probably not taking Lily out. You're not taking McCabe out. Not taking Benoit out. So unless one of these guys is included in a trade, are you just trying to get depth, or are you saying you're going to bring in a guy like Joel Edmondson, a Matt Dumba, and the expectation is when everyone's healthy, Lyubushkin is maybe your 7th, and you have Gio as your 8th. But that's not a major improvement in your back end.
No, and a lot of the chat right now is about Colton Parayko, and that's another guy. He's making 6.5, and people don't understand. I see people doing mock trades online, and I'm like, you have to understand.
Stay away from those, Justin.
Money in means money out.
Right.
The Leafs are cap strapped to the max. They have like $100,000 in cap space.
Wait, are you telling me that a Colton Parayko for Nick Robertson does not work?
I know. It's like, we'll give them Robertson, then they take Kampf and 1st round pick. And I'm like, First off, I think this Colton Parayko contract 2 years from now is something that they would have to pay a 1st round pick to get rid of. I don't think that's exactly a hot take. I don't think that's a hot take at all. But this is a contract that I think is 98% going to age poorly.
Oh, I would say even 100%. But, and this is why, for me, I'm all in with the Parayko move. I don't think it's going to happen. It feels like there was one kind of connected NHL insider who said, Parayko has been talked about with, I think, Ottawa, Toronto, and maybe one other team. And then Leaf Twitter just took it over, right? And then now everyone thinking it's going to happen. And then everyone's going to be pissed off and say, why didn't Treliving get Parayko? I don't think it will happen for a lot of the reasons you called out. But to me, I think that's the one name that is out there. Whether we think it's realistic or not is a whole other can of worms. But if it's truly a possibility, that is the one name out there that I would get excited about. I'd be willing to put in substantial assets to get, and I wouldn't care about if the last 2 years of his contract, he's not playing well, he's not performing. That would be the risk I'm willing to take, because you've got your win now window. If he helps you have 2 or 3 deep playoff runs, I don't care what happens in year 5 and 6.
Yeah, I agree. When you put it like that, I would sacrifice anything for a chance to go on a deep cup run. Yes, but and I see all the people saying that, oh, he could be the perfect match with Riley. Just just the way their games kind of would work. He's really super defensive. Riley has the offense.
Yeah,
right?
They played in the World Cup together. They were a pair in the World Cup with Team North America.
But unless you're getting 50% or at least 25, which I don't think the Blues would want to do, because it's 5 more years, and they would
sure on the term it's 6 more years on Parayko. They ain't retaining anything.
Yeah, and so it's going to be really hard to not only squeeze in the 6.5, but at the end to not have another Marleau situation where you're like, this guy is handcuffing our team. We have to get a first round pick to move this contract now. I feel like it's a risk, yes, and if it pays off, then you're like, Tree Living will look golden, but 3 years from now it could look like a terrible move.
Yeah, and that's obviously totally fair, and I think that's where, I think fans will, no matter what we give up for Parayko, everyone's going to be, I think there'll be a lot of people excited, but if it ends up being like, let's talk hypothetically, if it's like a first, Minton, maybe Liljegren or Robertson, people will just be up in arms. How can you not get retention on that? Terrible deal. Look what's going to happen in 4 or 5 years. But the teams that are winning, and are active at least through the first couple days here, leading up to trade deadline. Like, you look at what Colorado did. Like, they gave a first round pick to get Philly to take a bad contract in Ryan Johansson. That obviously, that deal, that player hasn't worked out well for them. You can always find a team to take on your problem contract. So if we're talking 4 or 5 years down the road and you're not looking to, or you need to move off of the Parayko deal, I feel you'd be able to. Like, you got to pay a price for it, but everyone always
it'd be another Marleau situation where you have to give up a first.
Probably.
But speaking of that, the Avs are, like, what they did yesterday, I thought was amazing.
Brilliant.
I thought the Sean Walker, like, himself, I know the Flyers really wanted to get a first round pick for him, and I guess they did. Just at the cost of taking on the rest of Johansson's cap hit, and then they threw him on waivers, so it actually really does matter.
Yeah,
but that trade that they did, Byram for Middlestat, is such a big. It's going to help them so long to prolong their window as well, because their biggest weakness is they don't have a 2C.
Exactly.
And just like that, they got it, and so
they obviously thought Ryan Johansson. Yeah, they thought Ryan Johansson could be that. They realized right away he's not, and they figured out a way to remove that and exchange it for a guy who should be pretty productive.
Now, I think the Leafs can kind of look at that and say, we can do something similar. Our biggest need is a one right D.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure the Avs didn't want to part ways with a guy they drafted 4th overall 3-4 years ago, who has a ton of potential, but they said, you know what, we have to eat this one and just go for it. The Leafs have to do something similar. Whatever it takes to get that number 1 right D. If they wholeheartedly believe Parayko is that guy for 3 to 4 years, then go for it. I think that if you approached a team and you gave them an offer they can't refuse for a first right defenseman, then it would work 100%.
Yeah.
You can go completely off the board.
For sure. And I think why it kind of does make sense, and I think why people have run with it, and why the Blues might entertain the idea of trading Parayko, when you look at their cap situation, they have like 4 30-year-old D-men. You got Nick Leddy, Torrey Krug, obviously Parayko in there. Yeah. So you've got like 4 guys in their 30s, all with term. Their window, I mean, I know they're still in the playoff hunt, but you could understand where they'd be coming from. You can understand where they're coming from, that, hey, if we could get out of one of those contracts and maybe reallocate that money elsewhere, it might help us in terms of trying to either, retool or be more competitive down the road, because clearly that's not working. Having that much tied up in those players. They're all quality D-men, but they're also not young, up-and-coming guys that will probably still be productive when the Blues are ready to make a run. So I can see where they'd be interested in making a trade like that. So it makes sense from that standpoint, but I also don't think they're going to be desperate to move Parayko, which is why, I don't see a trade happening, but, I'm trying to temper expectations there.
Yeah, and I guess going back to last night's game, just for a quick second, something that really upset me just watching that game, because as we discussed, it was just such a slow burn. Like, it was a game that was just hard to watch.
Yep.
I wanted to see Keefe do something to kind of spur the team up, change the lines. He kept rolling the lines out, the same lines, the Matthews line as it is, the Nylander line as it is, the Tavares line as it is, and didn't think maybe outside of the occasional Nylander Matthews Marner shift, he didn't do anything else. I thought it was the perfect opportunity to be like, all right, it's not working today.
Right.
It doesn't mean that these line changes are permanent, but hey, let's throw, I don't know, Yarncroke here, throw Nyes down with Tavares, something like that, where it's just minor switches, and maybe put Nylander back with Matthews. We know that quick switch can actually change something.
Yeah.
In the game. And I just felt like there wasn't enough fun.
There wasn't much, I agree. I think there was one time where he loaded up, and I think he had like Nylander with Matthews Marner, and I think maybe JT got a run, but
Joel Edmondson's a Leaf, by the way.
Who's that?
Joel Edmondson got traded to Toronto.
Oh, it's done?
Yeah.
Do they have the return on it yet, or?
No, Friedman just tweeted it right now.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's hot off the press. I see Saravelli and Friedman right now. Edmondson. Okay, so it looks like we are done.
Just as I said, that wouldn't actually do much for the team. Just right that.
Yeah. Wow. No, obviously joking. I don't think we're done. I'm also, as I'm going through the some of those reports and updates, I'm hearing Tyler Toffoli is someone that the Leafs have inquired on. And probably even more interesting is TJ Brody not on the ice at practice, is what I'm seeing.
That could be something as easy as the flu bug.
Totally. Well, Justin, all we're here to do is speculate and assume that everything means there's a blockbuster trade happening.
But if
here to be rational on why Brody might not be on the ice.
If Toffoli's going to be a Leaf, though, that would be super nice.
Can you imagine? That could be very good.
That would be a huge snag for the team.
Okay, so yeah, obviously we can kind of talk about Joel Edmondson. I know we talked a little bit about it before, but obviously I doubt he's in the lineup tonight. But that tells me again, kind of like the double retention on Lyubushkin, if you're bringing in Edmondson, you can obviously debate on if it's truly NHL caliber D-men or not, but you have 8 caliber NHL D-men when Gio's available and healthy. And then Connor Timmins as well. So you've got a lot of bodies there. That tells me something else is happening for sure. Like if it's Brody moving out, if it's Lily, there's too many guys there who not only are available to play, but are on your books. So that has to change in my mind.
What's happened? What's happened with all this Timothy Liljegren hate that's spurred up since Monday's game against Boston? What's going on with that? I feel like every time I open up Twitter or I turn on freaking the TV, everybody's talking about Liljegren isn't good enough to play in the lineup. He's not good enough for playoffs. What's going on with that? When 2 weeks ago, when Riley was out, everybody was like, oh, Liljegren's so good. And all of a sudden now he's trash?
Well, so before I give my perspective on that, where are you on the player? Are you confident with him if he's in your top
If you
four?
move Timothy Liljegren for anything less than another 25-year-old right-hand defenseman that could immediately play in your top four, is a terrible trade.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, from my perspective, I've seen and heard all of the chatter about, yeah, we think he's got a high ceiling, promising D-man. And all I've seen from him, especially, I mean, he's kind of been on the outside looking in the last two playoff rounds or playoff years for us. And I think there's been a lot of like debating, is that Sheldon Keefe doesn't give opportunity to young guys? And is that the reason that guys like Justin Hall, Eric Gustafson last year are finding more minutes available to them than Timothy Liljegren? I look at it the other way where, yeah, Timothy Liljegren, you know, when you see him play against Anaheim, San Jose, absolute stud. But we've seen, you know, two of the last three games or whatever, or not maybe two of the last three, but games against Colorado, Boston, he gets physically overwhelmed, as does Brody. I'm not just saying it's a Lily thing, but those guys in the D zone just cannot get to the puck. And even Liljegren last night, like it was a struggle. Like he took two penalties, bad penalties, just because the other guy wanted the puck more than him or was more physical. And I'm not saying Liljegren should just be dropped off at the bus station and you don't get anything back in return. I'm with you. You need to get something that moves the needle because you've got a young player still under control. He's an RFA. But for me, I'm not confident with him as a top four in a playoff series against Boston, Florida Rangers.
Yeah, like I think I agree with what you're saying. The last two games, he's been eating it a bit. Like he's been fighting the puck, but last night, especially that second penalty, I thought was super soft. The hook or whatever hold, I thought it was super soft. I think that happens on basically every face-off.
Yeah,
and
that's fair.
Right, but Monday night against Boston was really a rough one for him and Brody.
Yeah, and you could argue pretty much the entire team, right? So it's definitely not just a issue with him.
Yeah, but when you're a defenseman and like 4 goals are scored and you're on the ice for all of them, and then the camera pans right to you every time, it's brutal, and it kind of just highlights them even more. And there was that when the Leafs looked like they were coming back, and then it kind of bounces off his foot, and then DeBrusk is there to put it in. It's like a weird bounce like that, and everybody's like, right away is like, oh, Liljegren, what are you doing? How do you got to be more aware, fight guys off the puck, and it's just one of those games where you're just fighting.
I totally agree.
I think it's like I don't think he's the top pairing defenseman that people were making him out to be in the 5 games Riley was gone.
Right.
But I also don't think that he is this bum that could be just thrown in like a regular 5th round pick in a trade.
No, for sure.
That like that's what people are treating him like at this point. And it's like he's somewhere in the middle. I think that he's a low end number 4 defenseman.
100%. That's exactly where I have him.
You can have him on your second pair. He's not going to excel, but he'll be quality on your second pair. He can play on your power play too. He can block. He blocks a lot of shots. He's not afraid to, like put his body in front of it. And yeah, he gets overwhelmed sometimes, but he's not a number 1 defenseman. I feel like we have to get accustomed to him being just okay.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to like the bar, like, yeah, you can say Timothy Liljegren, he's fine for our top 4. But if in your top 4, you also have Brody and Lyubushkin, then it almost kind of just magnifies that you have 3 guys there, and probably not worth getting into the Morgan Riley debate, but at least 3 of those guys are not what you would call high-end top 4 D-men that you would expect a true Stanley Cup contender to be throwing out there in round 1. So yes, I agree. He's an NHL quality, low-end top 4 D-man, but he's one of the guys, and I put Brody in that too, where you might be able to pivot from one of those guys, whether it's in a trade or what have you, and upgrade. Because to me, if your top 2 right shot D-men in round 1 are Lyubushkin and Timothy Liljegren, you're going to get crushed. You're going to get crushed.
Yeah. I mean, and the thing is that everybody makes out Florida to be some next juggernaut giant that nobody can compete with in the East, and they're so deep. But I take a look at their defense on their blue line, and it's like, okay, Ekblad Forsling's their top pair. That's a great top pair. I like Forsling as a defensive defenseman. I don't believe in Ekblad that much. I think he's overrated.
He always
then you have Montour's on your second right D. Montour's really good. I like Montour a lot. And then there's Nico Mikkola on their second pair. He was a castaway from the Rangers last year. St. Louis said, we don't want this guy. It's kind of a similar situation. That's your top. Like if Nico Mikkola was a Leaf, people would hate on him.
It's not only the players.
They'd be like, why is this guy's in your top 4? You can't win a cup with Nico Mikkola as your second pair defenseman. It's kind of the same thing, you know? It's just because of the way Toronto is and how after every single goal you're on for, the camera pans right to Liljegren. Even if he's not really involved, it's what happened with Reeves earlier this year. Even if he's not directly the problem, the camera pans to him, and immediately every fan's like, "Oh, it's Liljegren again." Oh,
no, I think that's all fair. If you look at just on paper, you wouldn't immediately say that the Leafs are, that far off from having a similar blue line to what Florida or Boston is putting out there. But you also can't argue against the results. Like Florida has been a dominant team all year, went to the Cup final last year with most of those same guys, minus Racco Gudas. I think Oliver Ekman-Larsson, that's one name we didn't bring up. He's there this year, and he's been doing pretty well. But it's a combination.
Way, though. Like it's
100%. And that's where I was going to go with it. It's like a combination of the players, which I think you could argue at least 2 of those 3 names you brought up are definitely a tier or 2 above the guys that we have.
Yeah.
Just being able to play in the defensive zone, being reliable, managing the puck, being able to play a physical game. But yeah, I think that's where you kind of also look at the coaching. There seems to be something that Sheldon Keefe isn't preaching or isn't getting buy-in from his blue line that someone like Jim Montgomery is getting in Boston and Paul Maurice is getting in Florida. Because I agree with you. I don't think it's only about, if Toronto had the D-men that Florida has, they'd be the best defensive team in the league. Because I agree. Some of those names, they're not immediate like shutdown guys that you would expect. Bring them in, play them 25 minutes, and you're golden. So it's probably a combination, coaching and players.
Yeah, like I think Keefe has. I mean, Keefe's. If the proof is in the pudding for Keefe, I feel like what we have is what we have. He's a decent defensive coach. He has a good structure, but it's team defense, right? It's not just the defense that are at fault. On Monday, or was it Saturday? But Nylander blew the zone, and then the other team scored right after. Then Nylander didn't touch the ice for a while. Was that Saturday against the Rangers?
It's tough to tell because he does a flyby pretty much every game.
But like I remember it directly, and then as soon as he blew the zone, it was his guy that scored. And then he sat for a while, then he came back.
I think it was the Rangers. I think
it was the Rangers. Then he scored, yeah. But it's plays like that would happen on Toronto, but you wouldn't really hear about that happening in Boston, No, and that's what I mean.
Everything's magnified here. Totally. We get that. It's always going to happen, but until it doesn't happen in meaningful games in the playoffs, it might not be just like us being overly paranoid or just wanting to talk about problems with the team and not focus on the positives. The only way to change that narrative, which I agree is obviously a bigger deal because it's Toronto, only way to change that is to show something different, which is winning meaningful games. Mm-hmm. And I get it. That can't happen until April, May. But for right now, it feels like that kind of hesitancy to crown a guy like a Timothy Liljegren or to say our D group is good enough. It's tough to really support that until we see it prove that it's good enough, right? And sorry, on that note, are you ready for the return on Joel Edmondson?
Yeah, what is it? First round pick?
No, it's not that bad. So we're giving up the Islanders' third round pick in 2024 and Chicago's fifth round in 2025 to get the Caps to retain 50%. So the cap hit with Joel Edmondson is only $875.
Not bad.
So again, more moves that Treliving is making that obviously don't move the needle from an on-ice perspective, but does tell me something else is coming.
So a third, you said third and a fifth?
Third and a fifth.
So just slightly more than we paid for Liljegren, or for Lyubushkin, I mean.
Right.
Not terrible.
No,
you can deal with that. It's with these late round picks, they're like a bag of chips, right? Like you just throw them in there and you say, okay, if this is what it takes, the fifth round sweetener, here you go.
Yeah. I mean, the problem is we also don't have a lot of early round picks. So it's like you've got maybe a couple of drafts where probably the team really doesn't need to show up. But if you have a bigger move in mind, I can get behind everything that they're doing right now. If that's it, yeah, I think we have to protest.
Yeah, I mean, you brought in two defensemen for combined what? What is that combined? Like 1.2 mil?
In or around there, yeah, not much.
And it's none of these guys, at least one, maybe both, will not play game one of playoffs. Am I wrong in saying that?
Yeah, I think that's fair, but we have to see what happens between tomorrow. I mean, I think
Lyubushkin for now, unless we add another right D, I think he's perma on Riley's right D for the foreseeable future. I think keep
at least until tomorrow afternoon. We have to assume that.
Yeah. Yep. So assuming that we keep the team as is,
right?
Then at least one of them, if not both of them, will not be playing game one. At that point, you're giving up a third round pick for a guy that's sitting in the press box. It's just it's a repeat of Dave Riddick. And it's a repeat of Eric Gustafsson from last year.
Big game Dave? You didn't like that move?
I mean, he's playing good now.
He is, yeah. No, and that's the way I felt about the Lyubushkin trade when it happened. So I'm like, if you're still making a move, if you're bringing in, if you have a bigger target out there and that's going to be your true number one pair partner for Riley, is Lyubushkin just in the press box in game one? So now I have the same worry with both Edmondson and Lyubushkin if they bring in someone new. But that's where I'm not kind of, up in arms or overreacting to it, because I can't see that being what Treliving is thinking. I can't see him saying, yeah, great, let's get good value cap hits on both these guys, Edmondson and Lyubushkin. Yeah, sure, give a couple third round picks and a mid round pick, but these guys won't play for us. But I still, as GM of this team, feel that's the right move. That's where I'm like, there's no way. There has to be something bigger going on with potentially a Brody or a Lily or both being part of the trade.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, we've given up 2/3, a fifth, and a sixth for two defensemen. Meanwhile, we could have gotten Chris Tanev for a second, third, and a fourth. Like, come on. I wasn't even a big Tanev guy.
We didn't have the second, right? So is that why we're on the outside looking in with Tanev? So I hear what you're saying. It's like, if you were paying all that for two D-men who might not factor into your playoff lineup, why wouldn't you have paid a little bit more for Tanev?
I'm sure we could have found a way to get a second round pick if we really wanted to,
Maybe.
Like, I'm sure there's some deal out there where you could have gotten a second round pick off like a Chicago by giving them a young player. But I digress.
Well, I think that's going to be stuff we see tomorrow, right? And I think maybe even more so than we've seen up until now, where you've got these teams that are willing to be a broker for a trade. They're going to retain some salary for a contending team who just can't fit the player into their cap. So, yeah, we might see stuff like that. And I think there's I don't think that Joel Edmondson deal happens if Tree Living isn't already halfway towards a transaction that has pretty significant changes to the lineup we see, and probably, I don't know if we'll see it tonight, because if those moves are about to happen tomorrow, we might see that, Brody ain't playing tonight or Lily ain't playing. In my mind, I think there's something bigger that True Living is already halfway home to executing on, and that's where these Edmonton deals probably make sense.
Imagine it's like 6 o'clock and you get the update. Oh, Liljegren's not playing tonight. Brody's not playing tonight. Leafs have recalled Max Lajoie and Marshall Rifai to play against the Bruins. I'll be like, oh my God.
I think we got to get prepared for it. I mean, hopefully that announcement happens soon, because they're actually in Boston. So it's not as easy as just being able to call up one of those guys. That would probably have to happen either already.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Or they got to hop on a bird before we're done this episode, pretty much.
It'll go. Mitch Marner's playing right D next to Morgan Riley. And I'll be like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, we're playing Mitch Marner right D, and we're gonna have Ryan Reeves at left D for Brody.
I guess going to that fourth line. So last night, Gregor gets back in the lineup for Holmberg, and Keefe had a quote saying something like, Holmberg's game has slipped lately, so if you want to be an everyday player, you have to prove it. And I like that. I like that kind of keep Holmberg accountable kind of action.
I mean, I thought our fourth line Gregor back has actually been good. So
and get Gregor back in there.
For me,
get Gregor back in there for a game. Keep his legs fresh. I get it against Buffalo as well. It works. And maybe, who knows? Maybe you're showcasing Gregor. But I think Holmberg, like you said, that line has been so good together. I just don't see a reason why. Maybe if Holmberg's game has dropped a bit, I just don't see a reason why you take him out of the lineup. I think at this point, he's an everyday guy.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that's kind of been, I think we've seen that a couple of times. Like, he took David Kampf out of the lineup because he didn't think he was accountable for some of his responsibilities.
And he's been playing a lot better since then, though.
He's been playing better. Like, I've never been a big David Kampf guy. And obviously now that he's making 2.4, I just don't see much value coming from the player. Guy's a 51% face-off guy. Our penalty kill is bottom 7 or 8.
Terrible. That's something we need to find. You need to get PK, or I don't care about.
And Joel
Foley. Get me someone that's actually gonna kill us penalties, man. Holy.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's why he's had to experiment with guys like Matthews and Nylander. And I kind of don't mind those guys there, but I don't think they're the guys you want to be killing penalties against Boston or Florida. Might look good against San Jose or Anaheim, because we know Nylander, I think he still leads the league in shorties, but he's not going to get those same opportunities against the Bruins. That's just the reality. So if they can find someone who could kind of move into that PK role at forward, that would be huge too.
But for so many years, Marchand and Bergeron were like the key penalty killers on Boston. So, you've seen it done before where your stars can play all special teams. I agree with you, though. I would prefer not to have those two out there.
I also don't think Nylander is as defensively aware as Patrice Bergeron.
Yeah, exactly. They're not exactly the same players.
No. On the William Nylander front, because I feel it's been kind of a hot topic pretty much ever since he signed the extension. Yes, he's still been very productive, so I don't think any Leaf fan should be complaining about what he's done from a production standpoint since re-signing. But for myself anyways, and obviously want to hear your perspective on it, the things that have always been talked about with William Nylander and people who don't like his game and what he brings to the table, the lack of effort, the flybys that we talked about. I don't know if you caught it in overtime where he's done it basically 2 games in the last week where it's overtime, 3-on-3, puck is going the other way, and he just makes a beeline for the bench and puts the Leafs in a very tough position. Yeah. It was the one where Samsonov had to make an unbelievable save. And I think we would have heard a lot more about that in terms of William Nylander taking the early exit. And it just feels like, I don't know, like I've never seen a player who is either out of gas as often as Nylander is and has to end his shift prematurely, or a guy who just is indifferent towards his responsibility in the defensive zone. And that constantly seems to be coming up. But then he scores a goal last night. So I think everyone's like, oh, well, yeah, we don't worry about the other stuff as long as the puck goes in the net. But
I mean, it's a give and take. It's a give and take you have with Willie, right? And I remember from the All or Nothing docu-series that they had a couple of years ago, Dubas had a quote about Nylander. I forget exactly what he said, but I think it was something along the lines of like, he's sometimes like so good and other times he's so infuriating.
Right.
And that's just what you get with Willie, right? I feel like I don't agree with you that he's always out of gas, because I feel like nobody has a deeper tank than Willie. Like you've seen sometimes he has a 2.5 minute shift, then all of a sudden he's like, okay, I have the puck on my stick, now I'm gonna rip a breakaway.
Oh yeah, sure. If he has the puck or he thinks he can get the puck, he's got unlimited fuel. My issue is, especially knowing how his line with Bertuzzi and Domi,
which I don't think can last much longer.
Sorry?
Which I don't think that line can last much longer together.
No, you can't have that in the playoffs for sure. But on a line like that, where look, you just paid the guy 11.5, you kind of need him to be able to drive his own line, and that had to be the expectation putting those three together. He's just not doing that. Like, that line spends way too much time in the defensive zone. And yeah, we're talking about, obviously you can't use that line in the playoffs, but just more about the player. It just feels like, yeah, I get it, the give and take, but I think there's too much giving, in terms of what you're willing to accept from a guy who you're paying 11.5.
Honestly, the thing is that he's our leading point scorer this year.
Yep.
And he plays a key role on not just our power play, but our second line, and kills penalties now. He has the most shorthand goals on our team. Yep. It's a give and take with him, right? Like I understand that he's not going to be the best defensive player, but that's also not what we're paying him for, right? We're paying him to score. We're paying him to score those big goals, like when our team's in a slump and he snaps us out of it and gives us a 1-0 lead in the game nothing was happening, right? And I think that there was a couple shifts against Boston and New York, whereas it was like boom every time. They could not get the puck out of their zone, and then it was Domi like flailing to poke the puck just over the blue line, and then they just slobber off the change. But there was a couple times last night where it was mostly Nylander, because he just always has the puck on his stick. He's just skating around the offensive zone, creating chances, and that's what you want to see more of. You don't want them in the D zone. You don't want that line in the D zone at all. But for offensive zone, they could work. But for D zone, no, not a shot.
Right. And I think I agree with your points there. You obviously have to accept that he's not going to be a great two-way forward. My main kind of contention there is it's all about, looking ahead to, okay, can you win with this group? If you have Marner and Nylander, if you keep running it back with those guys as highly paid forwards, who you could argue for 11 that Marner's making, 10.9, Nylander 11.5, you can't have where every game or every other game you have concerns about Nylander maybe not showing enough commitment on a play, spending a whole shift in his defensive zone, doing his flybys. And look, I think Mitch Marner has a little bit in his game as well, where it's like, oh man, you know what? Like, could he have been a little bit harder on that forecheck? Could he have actually tried to get the puck rather than just kind of doing a little spin to maybe hope that the puck hits him like he always does? So there's issues with both players. And I think for me, it's a bigger picture than, okay, are you going to really complain about Nylander turning the puck over or spending time in the defensive zone? every other shift if he's also going to score 1 goal that game or get 1 goal, 1 assist, and really help out offensively. But for me, we've seen in the playoffs where, yes, has he been productive in a lot of games? Yeah, but has he been productive enough to balance out the bad? And I'd say the same about Marner. I'd say the same about Matthews.
Yeah.
All these guys are well under a point a game, career playoff scoring.
Oh, not well. They're right around. I think Marner is at a point per game, and I think everybody is just beneath.
Yeah, I think they played around 50 games.
I completely agree. It's like every last year in the playoffs when we needed the most, they didn't get it done. 100% agree. And that's where I feel like everybody's forgetting what Riley did last year in the playoffs and how clutch he was and how big of a player. And I remember seeing so many people online being like, this is Riley, right? Like, we're going to remember this next season when he's having struggles. We're going to remember this is the player he is. And then next season comes, as soon as he's struggling, everybody's like, get rid of this guy. He's so bad.
That's going to always be with Riley, where we know he's going to be huge in the playoffs. And if that happens again this year, you can kind of overlook what we feel hasn't worked well with the player.
I feel like Nylander, I'm comfortable and confident that he'll be just as he always is in playoffs, especially the last couple of years. He'll be either our best player or our second best player in the playoffs, right? I think he just has.
And I think with the contract he got, he has to be, right?
Yeah, he has to be, yes.
Yeah, and it's not anymore of the, Matthews and Marner weren't that great, but look at what Nylander did, and he's only making 6.9. And I get it. He's still on the books for 6.9 this year, so I know.
No longer like that, yeah. He doesn't have that.
For sure, fans of his will say, well, he's not 11.5 yet, so the bar isn't that high. But you just signed him. He needs to be not just one of the top players. He probably needs to be arguably our 1A or 1B this year.
Yeah. And I guess the final thing I want to discuss today is how about Samsonov, man?
Ooh, I like it.
I told you, that's our number one goalie when it comes to playoffs. At this point, I feel like he's kind of, unless he falls off again big time, game one he's our starter.
Oh, have you moved there? Are you?
I've been there. I've been. He's game one. Just that game against the Rangers, he was terrific. And then last night, he had so many big saves. Whatever was plaguing him earlier this year, it's completely gone now, and he looks like almost a completely different goalie.
Yeah,
he's not like earlier this year. I felt like every save was a struggle. He was like flailing. He was like overreacting to the puck. Yeah. And now he's like a lot more like confident in his saves. I don't know if you feel the same way, but that's just.
No, I'm very happy with him and getting more and more confident with the idea of Samsonov being potentially our playoff goalie. I'm still more on the side of Wall. To me, feels like the guy that should be your game one starter. Ask me again after tonight. We'll see how he plays. I mean, obviously the Monday game, I don't think Wall was really at fault for too many of those goals, but you can't give up 4. So, not exactly his best showing, but it does tell me the fact that he got, both Boston games this week, that if you asked Sheldon Keefe and he was willing to reveal, he'd probably still tell us that game one is Wall today. That could change if Wall doesn't play well tonight, but I still have more confidence in Wall. I mean, I look at Sammy, and yes, I agree with all the points you made about how he's really kind of looked more settled into crease and everything. But we just came off February, where I believe Samsonov still had a sub 900 save percentage for the month of February. So yes, he's been, he's definitely resurrected his career, no doubt about that, from probably a point in time where many were saying his career might be over. But I don't know if he's already got to that spot for me that he's my surefire number one. I don't think he has to prove that much more to get it, because I don't think Wall is like far and away above him right now. In second order.
I think it's close. I think it's close. Yeah. I was kind of more shocked that they didn't give Samsonov, or they might not give Samsonov tonight against
Agreed.
Boston, to give both goalies a look. Be
Yeah.
like, all right, because this is more likely than not going to be our first round matchup.
Yeah. Well,
Let's
and that's
see
where I
which
think,
we
yeah,
see
sorry, go
which
ahead.
goalie is better suited for the task, right?
100%.
And so in that case, maybe you go back to Wool last night, let Wool get an easier game against Buffalo, and then have Samsonov on the second half of the back-to-back go tonight, right?
Yeah.
That's maybe more something that I would have gone with. Who knows? Maybe they run Samsonov back on a double, like back-to-back games. I don't know how smart that would be, but
Doubt it. Yeah. Well, and I think that's where I was making that point, that it felt like when they kind of looked at the week ahead and decided that Samsonov was playing against Buffalo, Wall was in for the last game on Monday, assuming they go with Wall tonight, which I'd be shocked if they don't. I don't think there's any reason to play Sammy back to back with Wall there. So if they go with Wall, that tells me, as I said, not going to, not to echo what I just said 5 minutes ago, but yeah, that felt to me like right now, Key feels Wall's the guy, and they want to make sure that they can feel validated with that perspective by seeing him play the Bruins twice. If he gets shelled tonight, yeah, I think you have to say Samsonov has probably jumped him.
yeah, I mean, I thought Wool played all right on
Yeah.
Monday. I think there was like, it's so long ago at this point, I forget some of the goals, but there were some of them that I remember being like, maybe he could have saved that.
Yeah, a
But
couple.
there was like, I think there was one off the rush where I was like, he just got beat clean. I think it was the DeBrusque shot, and I was like, come on,
Yeah, I
make
mean, it
that
was a
save
good
for us.
shot, but yeah, I agree. I think you could have easily said, hey, one, maybe even two, you would have liked him to have, but I don't think I looked at any of those goals and said, like, oh my God, how does that?
Yeah, and the
What was
team
that
has to play
talented?
better. The team has to play better in front of him and help him out more.
Yeah,
And you're hoping that, that two points last night, you're getting pushed forward. And now it's like, if they lose this game, they're playing game one in Boston.
yeah,
It's
I
going to
feel
be
that's where
super
it's
hard to
headed
come back from
anyways.
it.
I feel that's where we're headed anyways, but yeah, it would kind of be definitive and pretty much confirm that we're going on the road, which, you know what? I don't even mind. I mean, you look at kind of this year, we've definitely performed way better on the road than we have at home. I think we've been stacking some home wins in the last couple weeks, but prior to that, we were like playing 500 hockey at home.
Yeah,
So I'm
and
not
true.
too worried about playing on the road to begin. But yeah, I
And
think tonight
last year we went 3-0 against Tampa in
on
Tampa.
the road. Yeah,
Yeah, we lost a lot of freaking home games last year. We lost 3 home games against Florida,
right.
2 home games against Tampa.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, maybe it's better to start off on the road, but Boston's not an easy place to play. Like, it won't be as many Leaf fans as there was in Florida and Tampa.
No, for sure not. I mean, I don't think anyone would say like, "Oh yeah, I'd love to play the Bruins on the road." Like that's exactly what we want. I don't think anyone should be talking that way. But
And
am I going to be like,
this is the problem that I hate with this wild card format for playoffs. It's March 7th. It's still
you
over a month
already know,
left in the year, and I'm like, it's gonna be Boston. There's
right?
no way we can move up, and it's gonna be pretty darn hard for us to move down.
Right.
So this is kind of where we're at. It's either we have home ice or we don't.
Well, yeah,
And this is
and
where
I
we've
think
been
what
with
like,
Tampa the last 2 years. This is
yeah.
where we were all those times with Boston as well, and it
When I
sucks.
think even last year, I think by November we knew
Oh
we
yeah,
were playing Tampa. You know, it was
yeah.
like it's done. It's done because
After
you had
Boston had that
Detroit.
start, you're like, yes, it's done.
Yeah, and Detroit, Buffalo, all those teams, Ottawa, Montreal were already kind of like done. You knew they weren't going to jump up. So it was like, okay, are we playing Tampa at home or on the road? That's
Yeah.
pretty much the only thing to figure out.
Like right now in the 1 through 8 in the East, I'm taking a look at it right now. You have Florida at 90, far and away the best team in the East, like points percentage wise. Then you have the Bruins at 87, and then the Rangers at 84. But they have 2 games in hand on Boston, so that's like interchangeable, right? And then you have the Leafs at 80 with 2 games in hand on Boston as well. So only 4 points back of the Rangers. So if it was the 1 through 8, right now we're the 4 seed. The 3 seed is right within our grasp. And then that makes Saturday's game even more important in the grand scheme of things if you kept it 1 through 8. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure.
So,
for sure.
I mean, I guess this is what the league wanted, to keep these rivalries. But now you're just getting the same series year after year, which kind of sucks.
And I think that, like everyone obviously talks about that. Yeah, we want to see Toronto, Boston. We want to see Toronto, Ottawa, Toronto, Montreal. And I get that, but at the same time, it just makes basically the performance of teams during the regular season like worthless, pretty much, right? Like,
I mean, it would be Leafs Canes right now. Leafs Canes would be, if it was 1 through 8. That's a good first round series right there.
Yeah, and that would be a tough one too. But yeah, I would just like to reward the teams that have had the better regular seasons and go 1 through 8. But I don't know. I guess the NHL, it sounds like they're not even considering going back to the old playoff format. So I think they probably feel it's even more for those small market teams where if you could sell a Florida Tampa Bay first round series, if you could sell a Islanders and Rangers first round series, Philly, Pittsburgh, not that those are all small.
Or like last year it was Rangers Devils first round. Like that's Battle of New York. You can make the storyline out of it, but I get that. But then it's year after, at least it felt like that as a Leaf fan. It was year after year. It's like, all right, it's Tampa again.
No,
it's
totally.
Tampa. Now it's Boston again. And so we face these 2 teams every single year. It's like, I want to face a Metro team in the playoffs.
For sure. Just to switch it up a bit, right? Like have like a different matchup would kind of be fun. It's already feeling like this format is getting a little bit
give me the Rangers. Like, give me the Rangers. That was such an exciting game on Saturday.
Yeah, that would be a very good matchup.
Competitive hockey game, goes to overtime. Overtime was really good. And then even shootout was fun,
Yeah. Okay, so here's a couple things in terms of news while we've been on here. So it looks like the Leafs are moving Connor Timmins to LTIR. That's what they needed to do to free up room for whatever Edmondson is making, $875K. But the one that kind of I'm looking at right now that just is absolutely crushing. So we were talking about Gustav Forsling before. Florida just announced an extension with him. 8 years, 5.75. How are all these teams retaining their talent for so much less than the Leafs are?
In Florida, man. Florida weather, Florida taxes.
Yeah, I mean, is that all that is? Like that's
I think that has a large discount. I think that's a big part of it.
Like if he's on the open market, Forsling, based on other contracts we've seen,
7+.
Could get 7+, right?
Yeah.
So it feels like there's more of it.
7+ in Toronto doesn't equal 5.6 in Florida.
Well, yeah, I think that's what we always hear, right? It's like the Toronto taxes, all of that. But like, I don't know. I get, with the dollar and all those kind of factors play a part here, but it does feel like teams are finding ways to get guys signed for cheaper. And it's not always just because of sun and state taxes, Like it doesn't feel like Nylander, 11.5 is just the cost of the Leafs doing business. Like, to me, that feels like, hey, we're going to do whatever it takes to get our player re-signed. But what was the, you wouldn't ever know because he didn't go to market. But what was the other offer that Nylander would have had in UFA?
Easily 12. I think he would easily get 12.
Nylander?
I think Chicago would have fucking, they would have rolled out the Brinks truck and said, here, Nylander, come play with Bedard. Here's every single penny.
12 million for Nylander. So he'd basically be making what like McDavid's making right now.
Yeah, but it's percentage of the cap and all that. It's different.
Different time when he signed. But I mean, you're getting to the point, even with the cap increase, the highest you can pay a guy I think is going to be about, 15.5 with the cap increase. So you start saying, like, how can you keep paying these guys, whether it's Nylander and soon to be Mitch Marner? How can you keep justifying that these guys deserve to be top 10 paid players? They're not top 10 players. Scoring leader wise,
I think Nylander's top 20. I think I can comfortably say he's top 20 in the league.
Top 20 forward? Yeah. Top 20 overall, if you're including...
Not including goalies. I think goalies are different, but...
Fair.
I think
I don't know. Yeah, I just saw that.
It's hard to rank goalies next to skaters, I feel like.
Oh, yeah. It's easier to do forwards separately.
Forwards and defensemen together, goalies separate.
Yeah.
Because, that's the way I've always done it.
They're talking maybe Jacob Chikrin to LA. Woo! It's starting to get exciting.
It's going to be a wild tomorrow. It's going to be a wild day tomorrow. I'm excited.
Wild tonight. It's going to be funny. It's going to be interesting to see what happens tonight because there's a lot of games tonight. So we might get a lot of, this guy.
On anybody. Yeah. Anybody out of the lineup. Suspiciously.
Yeah, we'll have to stay close to it, see what the Leafs are doing at the lineup and who might not be available tonight. But it's a big game. As we said, you want to get to 2 points. So be tough if they have to be shorthanded. But if it's for a big target, a big potential trade, I'm okay with that.
Yep, I agree.
All right, bud. So, we're hopefully get a dub tonight. And we know next week we should have a lot to talk about and recap after tomorrow's trade deadline. So enjoy it and enjoy the weekend.
Yep, you too.
And we're talking next week.
For sure. See ya.
All right. See ya.